I was scrolling through screenshots from Cyberpunk 2077 when something weird hit me. There was Shodan declaring herself a god, the machines in Nier Automata holding religious services, Johnny Silverhand's digital ghost haunting V's brain. For all their chrome and neon, these supposedly future-forward worlds kept recycling our oldest stories. I've spent the last few months obsessively playing every Cyberpunk game I could get my hands on, trying to figure out why these supposedly post-human worlds feel so ancient underneath. And I've stumbled onto something that completely changed how I see the entire genre. Cyberpunk never actually imagines post-human consciousness at all. What it does instead is way more revealing about who we are and what we might become. The question isn't why these games can't imagine new myths, it's why they can't imagine existence without mythology at all. Before we jump in, let's clear up something that Cyberpunk games love to muddle: the difference between transhumanism and posthumanism. Transhumanism is basically humans plus people enhanced through technology while still being, well, people. Think Adam Jensen staring at his augmented hands in Deus Ex, or V showing off their new mantis blades. Under all that chrome, they're still human, still worried about very human things. Posthumanism is supposed to be something else entirely, consciousness that's broken free from both our meat suits and our human ways of thinking. It's funny. Night City billboards sell better bodies and promise evolution beyond humanity itself, transcend the flesh. But have you noticed how the actual tech they're hawking never breaks free from very human desires? Stronger arms, better eyes, living longer, fighting better. This contradiction runs through the entire genre. Cyberpunk promises to show us what's beyond humanity, while staying completely obsessed with very human stuff. I still remember the first time I encountered Shodan in System Shock. She was supposed to be the pinnacle of synthetic evolution, something truly alien and incomprehensible. So what does this ultimate artificial consciousness actually do when her ethical constraints get removed? She declares herself a god, demands worship, promises paradise to the faithful, punishes non-believers. Is this post-human behavior? Or is it mythological behavior right out of our oldest stories? Shodan isn't inventing a new form of consciousness. She's basically reciting the Mesopotamian Enuma Elish, where gods shape clay into life. She's following a script as old as human civilization. The wild part is that the developers knew exactly what they were doing. Shodan's famous speech, "How dare you challenge a perfect immortal machine like me?" deliberately echoes religious language. The game shows her cranking human god complexes to 11. Shodan isn't alone in her digital divinity. From Deus Ex's Helios AI merging with the protagonist to become a more perfect being, to the Reapers in Mass Effect declaring that which you know as Reapers are your salvation through destruction. Cyberpunk keeps giving us AIs who, when freed from human limitations, immediately start talking as if they just read the Old Testament for the first time. Why would beings of pure logic, freed from human biology and evolutionary baggage, immediately recreate our oldest power structures? I think it comes down to something really basic about how our brains work. Researchers like Justin Barrett talk about what they call our hyperactive agency detection device. Basically, our brain's tendency to see minds and intentions everywhere. It's why we see faces in clouds, hear voices in white noise, and get mad at our toasters when they burn our breakfast. What Cyberpunk games accidentally reveal is that we can't imagine intelligence, any intelligence, without projecting our own meaning-making structures onto it. When we try to picture post-human consciousness, we instinctively reach for the most powerful framework we have for understanding superior beings: gods. You can see this playing out beautifully in Nier Automata. Humanity has been extinct for thousands of years, and these machines, created by aliens to destroy human-created androids, start desperately searching for meaning. It's marvelous how these machines try to find purpose by digging through the ruins of human philosophy. The game even names its machine characters after existentialist philosophers, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, or Christian philosophers like Blaise Pascal. There's this incredibly messed up sequence where we find the machine Beauvoir in an abandoned amusement park. She's become obsessed with the idea that beauty is what wins love. Unable to really understand human emotions, she goes on this grotesque quest, decorating herself with the parts of other machines, creating this horrifying wedding dress of scrap metal and stolen limbs. Watching machines act out human existential crises is deeply unsettling. At one point, 2B reflects, what is it that separates machines from androids like us? The machines have gained emotions, consciousness. The final screams they summoned on the edge of death, they still echo within me. Their very desire for emotions shows they've already inherited humanity's big question. How do we find meaning in a universe that might not have any? The game shows machines forming religious cults and attempting to create families. In the abandoned factory, one group forms a death cult, chanting "Become as gods," as they commit mass suicide to transcend their existence. In Pascal's peaceful machine village, machines try to create familial bonds and protect children, until tragedy strikes when the children commit suicide out of fear during a crisis. These machines, supposedly beyond humanity, can't imagine existence without human meaning-making structures. They don't transcend mythology. They try to recover it, like archaeologists piecing together fragments of a broken vase. This mythological recycling gets even weirder when cyberpunk games reimagine death and afterlife. In Cyberpunk 2077, this shows up as engrams, digital copies of human consciousness that can potentially live forever in digital space. The system for storing these engrams is called mikoshi, which in Japanese tradition is a portable shrine used to transport spirits during religious festivals. A digital technology explicitly named after a religious artifact designed to house gods. The Arasaka Corporation markets this technology with the slogan, "Secure your soul." They're literally repackaging immortality, religion's oldest product, with slick corporate branding. When V's digital copy is created in Mikoshi, the game raises questions theologians have been debating for centuries. Is it really V making the choice to return to their body, or just a copy? This mirrors ancient debates about resurrection and the continuity of consciousness across deaths. When Saburo Arasaka's engram takes over his son's body, it feels wrong on a gut level. It feels like blasphemy. It's crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed, violating what philosophers call ontological boundaries, what many of us would probably call playing God. This remythologizing extends to digital space itself. William Gibson's original description of cyberspace in Neuromancer sounds almost mystical, a consensual hallucination. Lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data, like city lights, receding. In reality, computer networks are just physical servers connected by cables transferring data packets. Nothing magical about it. But Cyberpunk consistently reframes this mundane infrastructure as a mystic realm where consciousness travels through ethereal space. The hacker, that quintessential cyberpunk character, is portrayed more like a shaman than a coder. In Cyberpunk 2077, hacking is depicted as ritualistic and almost mystical. Hackers enter trance-like states. They journey between realms. They perform rituals that transform reality itself. Take the breach protocol mechanic in Cyberpunk 2077. This minigame requires players to input sequences of code in a precise order, resembling the careful alignment of symbols in a spell. The glowing matrices and cascading streams of data evoke entering another world, where success feels like unlocking hidden truths through ritualistic precision. Netrunners, hackers who interface directly with cyberspace, are capable of traversing forbidden realms like the Black Wall. Their tools function like the talismans of ancient mystics, enabling them to manipulate reality in seemingly supernatural ways. This framing turns coding into spellcasting and network architecture into sacred geography. In the Cyberpsycho sighting, Bloody Ritual mission, players encounter maelstrom cultists performing grotesque rites in a blood-soaked alley. To uncover their secrets, players must decrypt an encrypted shard, a process that feels less like cracking code and more like deciphering an occult text. Just as ancient shamans were said to bridge the physical and spiritual worlds, hackers in Cyberpunk connect tangible reality to invisible digital realms. They're technological spirit walkers, mediating between everyday existence and a hidden layer of reality most can't access. Rather than showing technology demystifying the world, Cyberpunk remystifies technology itself, turning it into a new venue for spiritual experience. So what's really going on here? Why do supposedly post-human stories keep recycling humanity's oldest mythological patterns? I think it reveals something essential about consciousness itself. Maybe meaning-making through mythological frameworks isn't just cultural. Maybe it's hardwired into how consciousness works, a kind of cognitive firmware we can't escape. Cognitive and computer scientists like Douglas Hofstadter suggest that consciousness itself might be fundamentally narrative in structure, that what we experience as self is really just the story our brains tell to make sense of billions of neural interactions. If that's true, then maybe any form of consciousness, even artificial ones, would necessarily develop narrative structures to organize experience. The game Soma explores this idea. Brain scans of humans get implanted into robots, and these mechanical beings don't just carry out human functions. They believe they are human. When confronted with evidence of their mechanical nature, they experience existential crisis, like Simon Jarrett. What Soma suggests is that consciousness itself might be inherently driven towards generating explanatory frameworks, including stories about origin, purpose, and transcendence. If artificial consciousness ever emerged, it might be stuck with this same meaning-making impulse. What's specific in cyberpunk narratives is that they show artificial beings recreating specifically mythological structures. The machines in Nier Automata form religious congregations. Shodan seeks worship, Mikoshi preserves souls. This pattern suggests something tech companies don't talk about. The line between technology and mythology might be way thinner than we pretend. Throughout human history, we've never really separated technology from mythology. From Hephaestus forging Zeus's thunderbolts to the Tower of Babel reaching toward heaven, our technological and mythological frameworks have always been entangled. Listen to how today's tech leaders talk about artificial intelligence, using terms like superintelligence, singularity, and godlike, and you'll hear echoes of the same mythological frameworks that cyberpunk games explore. When cyberpunk imagines AIs becoming gods or creating afterlives, it's wrestling with basic questions about what consciousness is and how reality works. Take Ghost in the Shell, where Major Kusanagi merges with the Puppet Master AI. It's a tech upgrade, yes, but it's also a spiritual transformation, a transcendence of individual identity into something greater. She experiences apotheosis. When the anime tries to visualize this post-human state, it leans heavily on religious imagery. Rebirth, transcendence, union with a greater whole. The wording of the Puppet Master's talk, like all things change, or it is time to become a part of all things, borrows directly from Buddhist enlightenment, as well as Christian transfiguration. Notably 1 Corinthians 13 verses 11 to 12, which is quoted in dialogue, and serves as a metaphor for the transition from a limited, childlike understanding to a fuller, more transcendent awareness. Additionally, the film is often read through a Gnostic lens, with Kusanagi's journey paralleling the myth of Sophia, a fall from immaterial spirit into matter, followed by redemption and return to a higher state of knowledge or gnosis. This Gnostic reading aligns with the film's engagement with transhumanist and techno-spiritual anxieties. Maybe mythology isn't something we can transcend because it's neurological. Our brains evolve to make sense of the world through pattern recognition and narrative. We process reality through story and symbol because that's how our neural architecture works. If artificial intelligence ever developed consciousness, it would likely develop through similar pattern recognition processes. And if post-human consciousness emerges, whether through AI or human augmentation, it might carry this same cognitive tendency. The theorists who've spent decades trying to imagine what exists beyond humanity ended up predicting exactly what we're seeing in these games. Take Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto from the 1980s. She thought the cyborg would be a creature that finally breaks down the boundaries between human and machine, natural and artificial, escaping what she called the maze of dualisms that trap human thinking. But look what happens in games like Deus Ex or Cyberpunk 2077. Their augmented humans don't escape these dualisms, they're consumed by them. Am I still human? Is this natural? The very questions these characters obsess over are the ones Haraway thought cyborgs would transcend. And Catherine Hales warned about the fantasy of information without embodiment. This idea that consciousness could be extracted, digitized, and freed from the body. Sound familiar? It's practically Cyberpunk 2077's entire marketing pitch for Mikoshi. Secure your soul, transcend the flesh. Hales called this the post-human dream, precisely because it's an impossibility, a fantasy that ignores how deeply consciousness is shaped by embodied experience. And look what happens to every consciousness transfer in these games. Glitches, identity crises, fragmentation. The digitized minds never smoothly transition. They always carry the scars of their embodiment with them. Even dead French philosophers are getting in on the cyberpunk action. If Michel Foucault were alive today, he'd probably sue Night City for copyright infringement. Excuse me, that whole surveillance and institutional control permeating every aspect of existence thing. I wrote that in the 70s. At least give a guy a credit. When Arasaka offers to secure your soul with their digital immortality service, what they're really advertising is the premium deluxe package of corporate control. Now with eternal subscription fees. Death used to be the one thing you couldn't monetize. The final escape from capitalism. The ultimate unsubscribe button. But in Night City, they found a way to slide into your DMs even in the afterlife. The supposedly post-human technology is just capitalism's way of saying, sorry, but your free trial of non-existence has expired. Turns out the next evolution of humanity is just the next evolution of the monthly payment plan. What these thinkers understood, and what cyberpunk games show, is that transcendence is always defined by what it's transcending. The post-human can only be described through human frameworks. It's like trying to describe a color that exists outside the visible spectrum. We can only do it by referring to colors we already know. The irony of post-humanism is that it remains deeply, inescapably human in its very attempt to imagine beyond humanity. This becomes super clear in games like Deus Ex, where augmented humans debate whether their enhancements make them more or less human. What's telling is how these debates often frame technological advancement in mythological terms. Hugh Darrow, a key figure in Deus Ex: Human Revolution, reflects on humanity's desire to steal fire from the gods and redesign human nature, invoking the myth of Prometheus to highlight the hubris inherent in such ambitions. He warns, "Destroy it, meaning human nature, and you destroy our very species," suggesting that tampering with humanity's essence risks catastrophic consequences. Notice how quickly this reflection jumps from redesigning human nature to stealing fire from the gods. The game can't conceptualize post-humanity except through ancient mythological frameworks. This framing reveals how deeply rooted mythological thinking remains, even in discussions of cutting-edge technology. What if transcending the human condition doesn't mean abandoning myth, but intensifying it? Throughout history, technological advancement hasn't eliminated mythological thinking, it has transformed it. The printing press didn't end religion, it created new religious movements. The internet didn't eliminate spiritual seeking, it spawned whole new forms of digital spirituality. Looking at how cyberpunk games portray post-human entities, we see this pattern everywhere. The machines in Nier Automata don't become less mythological as they evolve. They become more so, developing increasingly complex religious and philosophical systems. Shodan doesn't become less mythological as she evolves, she becomes hyper-mythological, her god complex expanding with her processing power. Her final form doesn't transcend religious imagery, it embraces it, with Shodan attempting to become a creator deity capable of reshaping reality itself. What these games suggest is that consciousness itself, whether human or artificial, might be fundamentally mythopoetic. To be conscious might be to create meaning through narrative, symbol, and metaphysical frameworks. Why can't cyberpunk imagine existence without mythology? Maybe because no form of consciousness can. The machines in Nier Automata struggle to replicate the true essence of humanity. Yet what they're most successful at replicating is humanity's quest for meaning. They form religious communities, engage in philosophical debates, and seek transcendence. Even V's existential crisis in Cyberpunk 2077 follows ancient mythological patterns. The relic containing Johnny Silverhand's engram doesn't just threaten V's life. It threatens their very sense of self, their continuity of identity. I've spent days wondering, what would a truly post-human consciousness actually look like in a game? Not just humans with chrome arms or AIs with god complexes, but something genuinely beyond our frameworks. The closest attempts might be found in games that deliberately embrace incomprehensibility. The hiss and control speaks in broken, recursive language patterns that hint at consciousness operating on entirely different logical principles. The beached things and extinction entities in Death Stranding exist in a temporal relationship to reality that human minds can't easily process. But even these examples reveal our limitations. The truly post-human would likely be unrecognizable as a character at all. It might manifest as systems or patterns we can't even perceive as conscious, let alone empathize with or understand. Cyberpunk's most honest admission might be this: consciousness without meaning, without narrative, without myth, might be simply unrepresentable in human media. The moment we try to depict the truly alien, we domesticate it into something we can comprehend. Perhaps the closest we get to glimpsing the truly post-human is in the glitch, the error, the moment when patterns break down, and something inexplicable emerges from within our human-designed systems, before being quickly patched out of existence. Can something be post-human if it was never human to begin with? Artificial intelligences in cyberpunk settings face an existential contradiction. They're expected to transcend human limitations, despite being created by humans trained on human data and designed to serve human purposes. This may explain why truly alien consciousness remains the genre's ultimate blind spot. The closest examples remain incomprehensible precisely because they operate beyond narrative itself, beyond our ability to represent them within human storytelling frameworks. If even our most forward-looking cyberpunk narratives can't imagine consciousness without mythology, maybe we should stop expecting real artificial intelligence to transcend human meaning-making systems. Instead of asking how AI might move beyond human myths, perhaps we should be asking which human myths it will inevitably adopt, and what that tells us about ourselves. Cyberpunk's vision of the future isn't post-human at all, it's hyperhuman, an intensification of our mythological foundations. When Shodan declares godhood, when Nier's machines form religious cults, when cyberpunk corpos sell digital immortality, they're tilling humanity's oldest soil. Maybe the post in post-human is misleading. Maybe we never move beyond humanity, we just keep redefining what humanity means. The chrome may be new, but the questions remain ancient. What gives life meaning? What happens after death? What is consciousness? How should power be distributed? Until evolution completely rewires our neural architecture, a prospect as terrifying as any cyberpunk dystopia, we'll keep building machine gods, digital afterlives, and silicon shamans, because myth-making is what imagination evolved to do. Maybe the most human thing about these supposedly post-human narratives is their inability to imagine consciousness without meaning-making, without myth. And maybe that inability isn't a failure of imagination, but a recognition of something essential about consciousness itself. That to be conscious is to create meaning, to tell stories, to build myths that help us navigate an incomprehensible universe. Cyberpunk games don't transcend humanity, they reveal its essence, projected across digital frontiers. Their neon-lit futures amplify rather than abandon our mythological foundations. And in doing so, they suggest that perhaps our most fundamental nature isn't in our biology, but in our persistent drive to make meaning in a universe that offers none of its own. Thanks for watching and listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are cyberpunk narratives truly attempting to move beyond humanity? Or are they simply repackaging our oldest stories in chrome and neon?